VoyMonk video voice vlog, and it is Friday. It's the last day, the end of the month, man. Yeah, it's definitely something that's to behold. I'm not too happy about it, though. I'm just kidding. No, I'm the end of the month here. Just the weekend before Monday is the end of the month, but God, yeah, I am not a fan of the hot, warmer weather. Definitely not cool with all these, burn notices and burn notices because the fires and stuff like that. But yeah, I don't know. I guess it could be worse in some areas. It's definitely not here to complain or anything like that. It's just, this is going to be one of those laid back Friday vlogs, really. I know probably for kind of been running hot and stuff in terms of some of the content. And I'm always careful of that because I don't want it to be strafing into some of the other aspects that I think oftentimes require a lot more contention, and it's a lot of stuff that really can be found a lot of other places and stuff. So if I do talk about some things that occasionally are things that might have those types of vulnerabilities, then I'll make sure that I'm very clear about what it is that would be my intention for talking about certain things and that kind of thing. One of the things that I was kind of curious about doing is talking about censorship and stuff, which, like I said, not in the way that some people may talk about it. I'm talking basically about how censorship, and I'm not even talking about the internet or things that are happening now, but I definitely remember once upon a time, and this might be a bit of a tribute to George Carlin, the 7 words and 7, deadly words, whatever you couldn't use on not only on the internet, but on TV or radio or anything like that, which was pretty interesting. And, I'm not a swear, well, actually I am a swear bear. I just don't swear on here for obvious reasons because, there are some restrictions that would be applied towards content that is on here. And, I don't think it's entirely necessary. I suppose if I needed to do a vlog or kind of content that required swearing, maybe I would just make another channel for something like that. But I have no interest in doing something like that. So, but I definitely remember the days of cable, which was at one time the promised land in terms of uncensored content and the kind of content that you could find or you could have produced that wouldn't have any of the restrictions of not only just the swearing, but no commercials. And you were supposed to get away from all the things that were the trappings of over-the-air broadcast television. Kind of the way that what happens not only with cable, but happens with, a little bit the internet, YouTube, and so on and so forth. I guess streaming services could kind of fall into that same category, I guess. But for the most part, it was, I don't know, it was an idea that with reality came crashing down. Streaming services, no supposed to be any commercials. Now, some of them you can barely even afford unless you go with the commercial ads. And for me, I guess, I've gotten a little used to, for a time not having commercials, and wow, man, what an experience that was in terms of watching Stranger Things, for example, right? And going through an entire series and not a single commercial. And I would honestly have to say that it helped make for a better overall experience because of that. In fact, I would even go so far as to say, is, with swearing and all that kind of stuff, there are some programs that I watch that do incorporate some more mature and candid and certainly, whatever material. And I can honestly say that even though it's a part of certain things that you can get as far as unrestricted and unfiltered, I don't think I notice it. I really don't. I don't think I'll give Curb Your Enthusiasm. I mean, there's swearing and things like that on there, but I think for the fact that it's not really made as much or as big of a deal, probably kind of helps the fact that it really isn't that big a deal. I think, as far as, with the censors and censorship, so like when you're blurting something out, especially when you're that bleep button, I mean, the Jimmy Kimmel joke that kind of writes itself is fairly accurate, And I think the weird thing is that sometimes in reality, sometimes censorship can be used to actually facilitate certain ideas of the whatever language or thing that it's supposed to be screening out. It actually makes sometimes a bad situation worse, I guess some people can maybe compare it to the Streisand effect, right? You'll never know how much of a problem something can be until you actually complain about it or you bring light to it, thus making and creating the situation far, far worse and much more of a problem than you anticipated. And like I said, and I can understand as far as the perspective that, censorship or certain kinds of words or content isn't necessarily acceptable to all. I get that. And I do think it's just really weird that, how do I put this? Certain people's senses seem to kind of get informed, and I'm not talking about any kind of specific bent. I'm simply saying just in general that, and it doesn't have to be censorship. I mean, pop culture is a perfect example of what everyone likes and what, everyone doesn't like. And while certain people can be content and be happy with the fact that they have access and of course can get sources for what they like, it's still sometimes so much more important to have influence and control over what other people get to enjoy because of that. And that's something I don't like. I don't necessarily think that it's helpful. Like I said, I think oftentimes those types of censorships can really lead more to highlighting and increasing whatever is supposed to be omitted rather than actually, if you dislike something or something you think shouldn't be a factor or shouldn't be produced because of a greater harm. I think, like for instance, like in the 70s and 80s, there was a war on obviously pornography and people producing adult content in that regard, and it didn't make it go away. It certainly didn't make it less popular, and the fact that whether you agree with it or not, whether it was a kind of one of those things where it's like the remedy for or the cure often made the sickness or whatever worse, and whatever was you trying to address. And like I said, the funny thing is that with each new frontier, like I said, going from over the ad, TV, channels to cable, it was supposed to be, no, well, you get cable, no commercials or limited commercials, and then, the content was more, geared around what was the entertainment value as opposed to, what service it was providing, which is what over the air basically is meant for, standards and practices and all that kind of stuff, as far as, a license to, serve the public trust. Cable wasn't supposed to have those kinds of trappings, and the FCC And Scope really had kind of a, nothing, really in a way of doing that. But I don't think it really stopped, Congress and, I'm not getting into political, but, government entities, people that were represented by, from, putting their thumb on the scales and going, oh, okay, well, it's cable, but think of the children, which is an important, children are important, and, they're part of the structure of our society. But it began to then be something where the cable companies and the content providers began to self-regulate themselves. So not only could, it still didn't fall under the threat of at the threat of the FCC is expanding its jurisdiction, but without those coils, it, basically itself said, okay, from now on, the commercials were a little bit different. That made its way in shortly thereafter. Cable was introduced in the 70s, but as far as, what was going to be available in terms of more adult-themed content, that was, a la HBO and Skinamax and some of the premium channels, which if you were a little pervert like myself and, staying up a little bit later, the very, very few times that I had access to it, well, then, you weren't getting even that when it came to even the premium services. I mean, there were still limitations not only to what can be seen and how, but I think it was towards later the 80s and then the early 90s, there began to become a window from which at what point certain kinds of content could even be aired at all. I think it was like after the 8 or 9 o'clock time frame, and there still wasn't any swearing, although thanks to Comedy Central, they kind of brought it back a little bit. I think with South Park and all that kind of stuff, because it was kind of funny. I think for a while people weren't even sure that you could swear on cable, but nope, you could swear on cable. You just weren't allowed to do it at some point because they all agreed to not do it until I think after 8 or 9 o'clock at night. So, and funnily enough, as it progressed even there after that, the internet wasn't really necessarily as regulated as cable was, but eventually, it started out as kind of the Wild Wild West in all things that are concerned. But eventually, yep, the government came a knocking. And, and the thing I was talking about, adult content as far as that kind of thing, the internet was a booming success for that industry. Like I said, it not only didn't go away anyways, but it morphed into that and then exploded to where some people used to have a coworker that said that basically the internet was born or sustained on the backs of probably the adult industry, and it's not really the first. Betamax versus VHS, that was something he would suggest. That was, VHS won out over Betamax, which was a superior technology because of, guess what? Guess who? And so, like I said, it's interesting, and now fast forwarding into YouTube and that, as far as, I could swear, I could use the F word or whatever, but again, even though there's no FCC and there's no constraints, there's still going to be limitations. There's still going to be pressure as to what, can't, even if the general idea is that I believe you're not supposed to be under the age of 13 without a parent's consent to be on YouTube anyways. That's just the point that I'm making, but it really doesn't have much to do with the fact that certain content and certain, ways of, being in the algorithm is curated by the fact that, even though it's supposed to be kind of this free speech, space, which, like I said, is fine. Like I said, there are still going to be restraints, and it's some people would say it's the government and all that stuff. No, it's not. It's us. It's people. It's human beings. I mean, everyone has, I said before, not all things for all people, but I believe everything has a place, and that say that as a snob. But when there's limited access and limited availability, and people really don't have that source to go, to their corner or their outlet or, whatever, engage, these oftentimes are quite the circumstances. But, I still don't think that means you tell people where and when they can go. But I definitely think it became something that we had as more mindful in terms of how things have developed. So, the point that I'm mentioning as far as on this Friday in terms of censorship is that, there's lots of things that I could do. There's lots of things that I choose to do. I don't think not swearing or making certain statements are a part of being inauthentic. Is that a word? But be that as it may, and I do think that censorship and guidelines definitely have their places as well. I'm just a pretty solid believer that sometimes an overcorrection can actually be a worse than the problem that was being corrected for. And I think not all things for all people, but I think just as I do as far as content overproduction, which sometimes some of the censorship is really production. It's really just a way to kind of appease and do makeup to, try to be all things, maybe to all people. And I think, as been stated many, many times, trying to please all people, all times is a way to eventually please no people any of the time. And, like I said, I don't think that that's a very revolutionary thing to say, but I think I'm babbling now. Yes, this is a Friday vlog, more of a decompression. Hopefully this is, it's not as bad as maybe it seems in terms of, like I said, it's been one heck of a week, and basically trying to bring a little bit more lighthearted and fun content, and do some other things besides some of the stuff that I've been talking about as far as content. I think over the last month, whether it seems to have a different tone one way or another, it's about, my life experiences, content, and basically what this channel is about. So censorship aside, and just basically kind of babbling and decompressing this Friday. Hopefully you enjoy what you're listening to, and you know what to do. If not, Monday, last day of January, June, and then we'll be in the July where I'm counting down the days of the end of summer. I know people love it, but yeah, it's not my thing. I don't like this bad weather. Anyways, that's going to do it. Thank you for listening. And, thank you for listening to the Friday vlog. Take care.